A Baltimore cop shot in the line of duty. How a fellow officer's quick actions may have saved his life. And as Hurricane Ian moves up the coast, there's a local crew headed in the other direction. How Maryland Force One is preparing to help with recovery efforts in Florida.
And the remnants of Ian have actually arrived right here in Maryland. I'll let you know exactly what that means for your weekend plans in a couple of minutes.
For starting off your weekend with us and your month here on this October 1st, I'm Taylor Stewart. But we have got a lot of stories to cover this morning. We're following up on 4 major ones. First, a Baltimore City police officer shot in the line of duty. How a fellow officer's quick thinking likely saved his life, and what we're learning about the shooter. Nearly $2 million are also headed to nonprofits aimed at preventing violence in the city. But how exactly will that money be used? And a pair of doctors caught up in a Russian espionage plot. Why one expert considers our area to be a global epicenter for spies. But first, we are still tracking the remnants of Ian as Hurricane Ian makes its way up the East Coast. The remnants of that storm have already arrived here in Baltimore. We're taking a live look over the Inner Harbor, where it's dark and it's wet, it's mucky, and it's pretty gloomy this weekend. Meteorologist Amy Aronson is in the studio with us this morning with what we can expect in our region today. And we also have more coverage coming up in Annapolis as well later. Amy.
Exactly, Taylor. No longer a hurricane. It's just the remnants of Ian right now that's pushing through our area. But yeah, Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers is going to be joining us from Annapolis this morning. And that's because a coastal flood advisory is in place there. And that's going to take us up through 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, we had a lot of rain overnight. But now I'm also tracking this onshore flow, and that's shoving all the water up against the shoreline there. And that means around high tide, right around 9 a.m. this morning, we will see some minor flooding. Radar does look much improved. Fortunately, much of the heavy rain already moved through the area overnight. This morning, we're just left behind with some pesky showers. Little bit of light rain showing up right now just south of Annapolis, and we've got some additional showers in Carroll County, north and west. And this is going to be the scene all day long. Not really heavy rain, just on and off showers. We're also looking at breezy conditions. Current wind speeds coming in anywhere from calm up to 15 miles an hour. But I want to show you the direction. See that flow there from the east and the northeast? That's that onshore flow. That's what's pushing the water up against the shoreline and resulting in some minor flooding, especially in the Annapolis area this morning. That means use caution if you're out walking the dog, especially in that area. Otherwise, I would grab a nice warm rain jacket, maybe keep the walk a little shorter this morning, because not only is it damp and dreary out there, it's also breezy and cool. Temperatures will be stuck in the upper 50s, low 60s through the end of the morning. Now, coming up in 10 minutes, I will walk you through our future scan for the rest of the weekend. I'll let you know exactly when you're going to want to make some indoor plans and when I think you could squeeze in some activities outside. Taylor?
Now, to help in the Hurricane Ian recovery effort, FEMA is calling in the Maryland Task Force One. The urban search and rescue team is deploying tractor trailers, box trucks, pickup trucks, vans, boats, and 45 different specialists. The Montgomery County-based group had recently been in Puerto Rico helping with recovery efforts there from Hurricane Fiona. That knocked out the entire island's power grid offline. But we've seen those impacts this weekend here as we continue to track Ian. The Fells Point Fun Fest already postponed, and Ocean City is canceling its annual Oceans Calling Festival. Maryland football hosts Michigan State tomorrow at 3:30, and the Ravens are scheduled to play the Bills on Sunday. As of right now, those games are still going on as planned. Turning now to a city in crisis. We begin with a chaotic scene in East Baltimore. A city police officer shot, and a fellow officer's immediate reaction is being called life-saving. Fox 45's Keith Daniels is following up on this story for us.
Tonight, a Baltimore City police officer recovering at Johns Hopkins Hospital after being shot while on duty. Deputy Commissioner Rich Worley at the hospital later confirming the officer is out of surgery and stable. Earlier, Worley at the scene telling us how the officer was shot in the leg during a struggle with the shooter and how another officer jumped into action to help the injured officer.
The officer has a gunshot wound to the thigh. The second officer, who, by the way, is an officer who's in field training, applied the tourniquet and probably saved the officer's life. He has non-life-threatening injuries. He's being treated at a local hospital.
The shooting happened at about noon on East Chase Street near Asquith Street.
We don't do that around here. This is something new.
Rose Early was stunned after multiple shots rang out inside her usually quiet neighborhood. One of those bullets hitting the officer.
All I seen was a nice young man as far as I was concerned until today.
According to Early, the shooter is a 19-year-old young man who used to help her around the house. She watched as he was arrested.
Came right past my door down there to Harford Road and put him in the paddy wagon.
The young man's sister showed up at the scene, spoke to Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor briefly.
It's something that's going on with him that she's been trying to get him help with.
She said her brother suffers from mental illness following multiple outbursts and fits of rage. Her mother recently taking out a restraining order against him. But today, her brother breaking into his mother's home with a gun.
She felt like she was in fear for her life.
Police confirmed they did respond to a crisis call. When officers arrived, the mother safely removed from home while officers struggled with the man inside. Investigators say officers managed to take the suspect into custody without any shots fired by police. Worley satisfied how the situation was handled.
There's another example of officers doing a fabulous job in a very dangerous situation.
We've seen a series of violent outbursts against police over the last year. In June, a Baltimore police sergeant was hit by a car twice and dragged several feet while trying to complete a routine traffic stop. And less than a month earlier in Wimlico County, Sheriff's Deputy Glenn Hillard was shot and killed while trying to arrest a repeat offender who was let out of Baltimore City Prison on a plea deal. Now, a Baltimore County police officer took a bullet in his arm in June while resolving a dispute inside a Towson apartment complex. A man pulled a gun on a group of officers who shot and killed them. And then last December, Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley was killed in the line of duty, prompting a failed attempt from harsher penalties for violent crime against first responders. We've got more on that at 10:30. A double shooting in the heart of Fells Point, part of another violent weekend here in Baltimore. At least 19 people have been shot since Sunday. And on Thursday, a kid was shot on the Mondawmin bus loop, one of Baltimore's biggest transit hubs. Police say two kids were fighting when one pulled out a gun on the other one. You can always download the FOX45 news app for these up-to-minute updates as far as shootings, conditions, road closures. Just search WBFF in your app store. Our birds aren't going anywhere, but find out about the deal that will come as a sigh of relief to Oriole fans.
And here's a look at what's left of Ian now pushing through Maryland. I've got an updated look at exactly when we'll see rain this weekend and how much we're expecting in just a couple of minutes. It's 7:07. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
All right, now take a live look over M&T Bank Stadium as two of the NFL's top offensive teams are set for a showdown this weekend. The Ravens hosting the Bills. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. This is going to be fun. And the Ravens may have some good injury news. This could be the week we see left tackle Ronnie Stanley back on the field. He's listed as questionable for Sunday's game, but we can make sure we can tune in here on Fox 45, 1 o'clock, that kickoff. Rocco Descandro will have more on youth sports ahead in Sports Unlimited. But it looks like the Orioles won't be leaving Camden Yards anytime soon. The team announcing they have renewed their lease by the end of this year. The Orioles are celebrating their 30th year here at the park. Team owner John Angelos recently addressed the team's future, committing to staying in Baltimore long term. An international threat at military bases, the toxic chemical that may be putting armed men and women at risk. And it's an epidemic that's taking over the country, the deadly drug ring that's coming over the border and into neighborhoods. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News, all local, all morning. In today's Addicted America, fentanyl is driving the nationwide overdose epidemic. The deadly drug is coming over the border into American neighborhoods. Angela Brown with the National Desk has more on how this drug is getting into our country.
A new report just released from the Cato Institute examines fentanyl seizures and arrest data at ports of entry, uncovering that fentanyl is overwhelmingly smuggled into the U.S. by U.S. citizens, not asylum seekers. A big bust making headlines nationwide. Border Patrol agents seizing 4.3 million in fentanyl in Arizona, reportedly enough to kill 42 million people. Arrested 2 U.S. citizens.
But you'll find most fentanyl, though, is brought through a port of entry anyways. Someone with legal status.
To understand how fentanyl is getting into America, you may want to start here at busy legal border crossings. Through August, Customs and Border Protection says nearly 157 million people have crossed through ports of entry on the southern border. Dr. Manjarres spent 23 years in U.S. Border Patrol in that region.
Nothing crosses illicitly without the drug cartel's permission or knowledge.
This new report from David Beer from the Cato Institute, an organization that promotes libertarian ideas, examines how fentanyl is smuggled in. Using data from Customs and Border Protection, Beer found over 90% of fentanyl seizures occur at legal crossing points or interior vehicle checkpoints, not on illegal migration routes. And just 0.02% of the people arrested by Border Patrol for crossing illegally possess any fentanyl whatsoever.
What's going on is U.S. citizens are being hired by the cartels because they're subject to less scrutiny at ports of entry, and it's less likely that drugs will be caught when they're brought through a port of entry.
But many Americans think the opposite. A new Ipsos NPR poll found that 39% of Americans, 60% of Republicans believe migrants crossing illegally are bringing most of the fentanyl into the country. But Beer says that's wrong.
It's much easier to conceal a very potent, very small, condensed substance like fentanyl on legal baggage and legal luggage than it is to conceal a whole person crossing the border with drugs on them.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Now, the remnants of Hurricane Ian have made their way to Baltimore, and we are in for a wet and gloomy weekend. On the left there, you can see a live look at Towson, where rain is coming down. Those roads already soggy and wet. And on your left, our radar authority is tracking that storm's path. But let's begin here with live team coverage this morning as we track where that storm is heading. Meteorologist Amy Aronson in the studio with us this morning. But first, we're going to send it over to Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers, who's live in Annapolis this morning. Jonathan, what is it like where you are?
Yeah, you know, we're down here in Anne Arundel County where the big story is actually some of the water that's coming up from the Severn River and the Chesapeake Bay. And you can see here, this is where the water line is. Thus far, you can kind of see where the bricks are getting wet. Now, this area does flood quite a bit, but I think it's going to be a little bit worse than usual. You can actually see, as my photographer Brandon kind of focuses in, there's a little wood piling area. That's where the river usually is. That's where the water usually sits. And there's plenty of boats behind us here, too, because I believe we've got the Annapolis Boat Show going on here beginning tomorrow, some of the preparations, and we're just chock full of boats. So hopefully the boats are going to be safe from all this. But what we expect is that this water is going to be driven in by some of those remnant of Ian winds that it could go from here all the way to perhaps some of these little statuettes that you see here, maybe the end of Compromise Street going underwater as well. Right now we are located at Ego Alley, Randall Street, so the parking lot's still dry, but that could go underwater as well, and we could see some more rain and some wind. Our high tide here is going to be at 9:02, so some nearly moderate level flooding happening later on this morning. Of course, we're going to keep track on that here in Anne Arundel County and Annapolis. Amy, how's it going there in the studio?
Yeah, I am keeping a watchful eye on the winds because we know that's playing a big role in what's happening with our coastal flood advisory for Anne Arundel County. Doesn't look pretty anywhere. It's gray, it's gloomy. Fortunately, we're done with the heaviest rain, but we're dealing with the nuisance stuff, and that's the on and off showers that will linger today, along with that pesky and actually pretty persistent northeasterly wind now coming in at 16 miles an hour. That's also keeping us cool. We're only in the upper 50s right now, and it is going to be a cool day across the board. We are tracking what's left of Ian. That's well off to our south and west, but it's shoving a lot of moisture our direction and also shoving in that onshore flow. And that's what's going to cause some extra water to pile up along the shoreline there in places like Anne Arundel County. Otherwise, you can see the heavy stuff is now to our north and east. That's the yellows and oranges you're seeing here on the weather map. Locally, we're just going to be dealing with on and off showers today and actually all weekend long. And that's what the radar currently shows. Little bit of light rain, some sprinkles showing up in the Annapolis area. We've got some additional ones showing up north and west of Baltimore, out towards Carroll County, right around Westminster. And that's going to be the story today. It's not a total washout, but it's also not completely dry. I will be tracking on and off showers straight through this evening, overnight tonight, and that leads us into Sunday. This means if you're headed to the Ravens game tomorrow, here's the scene at 1 o'clock. Yes, we've got some on and off showers, but it's not pouring. And that's going to continue through game's end. Actually, it's not until Sunday night that rain picks up in intensity. This is as that actual remnant low passes by. Our rain will pick up briefly. So some steady rain overnight Sunday into early Monday morning, and even Monday looks unsettled with some on and off showers lingering. So for today, here's a look at how much more rain we're expecting. Actually, this forecast model is going to take us all the way through early next week, showing an additional inch and a half in some locations, and that's over the next 3 days. Today, I'd have the rain gear ready if you're going to be doing anything outside. Also, a nice warm jacket. We'll spend today in the low 60s. Tonight's the perfect night for a movie in with the family. Low 60s will stick around with on and off showers. For the Ravens game tomorrow, have the rain jacket with you. We'll spend the day in the upper 50s, low 60s. And yes, I would plan on some spotty showers throughout the game, actually all the way through Monday. After that, we'll finally dry things out and start to warm things back up. The good news is the 70s are back by midweek. Taylor?
We are learning more about the shooting in East Baltimore that landed a cop in the hospital. What's being done to prevent the violence here in Baltimore, and if there is a cause for concern. And the lingering danger on military bases, the toxic chemicals the Defense Department knows about but still has not cleaned up. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News, all local, all morning. This morning, a growing threat on U.S. military bases. A dangerous toxin that's lingered on several bases for years. And despite health officials knowing about it, they still have not started to clean it up. Spotlight on America, Chris Daniels explains.
Drive over Deception Pass in Washington State, and you'll be exposed to some of America's most beautiful views. But here, at this scenic spot on Whidbey Island, just north of Seattle, there are growing concerns about what else people are being exposed to from this island's naval air station.
So you moved here for the beauty of the island?
The beauty, yeah.
And you discovered something else?
Right. These chemicals are a curse.
The chemicals environmental activist Rick Abraham is talking about are known as PFAS, a set of man-made toxins which have been tied to cancer and other health problems. For decades, these chemicals were used in a type of firefighting foam on military bases, sprayed by the gallon on runways during training exercises and to douse fires, including here at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. Government leaders confirm those toxins seep their way into the soil and drinking water of surrounding communities.
Do you believe there are people getting sick right now because of what's happened there?
Yes, I do.
On Whidbey Island, the Navy's own tests show levels of one type of PFAS chemical in the drinking water that's more than 30,000 times what the EPA now considers to be unsafe.
The people who cause the pollution should be responsible for cleaning it up. You cause harm to someone else, you're responsible for fixing the problem. Common sense, common law. So the Navy needs to deal with this situation.
This situation extends far beyond Whidbey Island, with more than 700 military bases either known or suspected to have PFAS contamination. That means millions of Americans are potentially at risk, according to Melanie Benesh, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Environmental Working Group.
And so if you have been living near a military base for a long time, it's possible that you have been drinking water that's contaminated, and you could be at risk of seeing health effects from those exposures.
This summer, her organization looked at the 50 military sites dubbed the filthiest in the U.S. by Congress, spanning 30 states and including Whidbey Island, and found that while they've all launched investigations, none have begun the phase of actually cleaning up.
Part of it is just DoD slow walking this issue. They have known that PFAS are dangerous for decades. So I think the Department of Defense is committed to cleaning up these sites eventually. But the question is, how long is it going to take?
The Department of Defense refused an interview with Spotlight on America and did not answer our specific questions about timelines for cleanup. That leaves Whidbey Island residents like Brian Christensen with troubling questions. He lives just steps away from the base and sees the planes fly overhead every day.
My biggest concern is the not knowing. We just don't know what the long-term implications are. I'm going to be really sad someday if something happens to my kids because some chemical that wasn't being looked at properly affects them.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
Now, naval officers say their number one priority is to identify contaminated drinking wells. The Navy is also transitioning several homes to city water lines. Officials say it's too premature to estimate a start date for cleanup. Nearly a year after Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley's death, what's being done now to beef up punishment for crime against officers? And as Hurricane Ian approaches Maryland, we've got the latest coverage from meteorologist Jonathan Myers and Amy Aronson coming up with our team coverage. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News, all local, all morning. Good Saturday morning, and thank you for being here on this October 1st. It's the first of the month, And it looks pretty outside right now, but it's not going to be that way for long. Taylor Stewart here. We are tracking the remnants of Hurricane Ian as they've made their way here to Baltimore, and we are in for a wet and gloomy weekend. Now we have a live look over Towson, as you can see over there, already rain falling, mucky roads. And on your left, you can see our authority radar tracking the path of Ian. But we've got that full coverage for you right now in the studio. We've got meteorologist Amy Arison, but we also have Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers outside with us in Anne Arundel County. Jonathan, tell me, what are you seeing where you are? It looks like that water is rising.
Taylor, it is just not very pretty out here. It may look pretty on the cameras, but it doesn't feel very pretty. You can see the winds, actually. If we take a look up here, some of the flags and some of the plants that are hanging here on Randall Street, right by Ego Alley, if you're familiar, in downtown Annapolis. The winds have been coming in 20, 30, 40 miles an hour. Some limbs have been taken down. I mean, the high water's coming up, but at least somebody's enjoying it, right? The ducks are really enjoying this weather. When we say it's weather for the ducks, this is what we mean. So you can really see, again, the water is beginning to lap up here. We are tracking the high tide in Annapolis as it continues to come up here on the bricks in the little park at the edge of Ego Alley. And our high tide at 9:02 this morning. We're going to have full updates on that throughout Fox 45 Morning News. Amy?
Yeah, and the good news is at least the heavy rain has already pushed through, Jonathan. But of course, now we are seeing the impact of some potential coastal flooding. And that has to do with the winds. That onshore flow very persistent today. And that's what's going to result in some high water in the Annapolis area. But radar looks much improved, even from a couple of hours ago. We have a couple of lingering sprinkles out there this morning, some showing up in Pasadena. That's the light green you're seeing here on the radar. Temperature-wise, wind-wise, winds are picking up. It feels cool. Here's a look at most recent wind gusts. We've had winds gusting up to 28 miles an hour where Jonathan is in Annapolis, 26 in Baltimore City, and even out in Westminster, 24 miles per hour there, and all the winds coming in from the northeasterly direction. That's going to keep us downright cool today. We're hanging out in the mid-50s this morning. That means if you're stepping out to maybe get the dog out, squeeze in a jog or run, I would layer up because it is cool to begin, and it's going to stay that way pretty much all day long. With on and off showers through midday and through this afternoon, not much of a warming trend today. Temperatures will be stuck in the low 60s as we head through the afternoon. Now, coming up in 10 minutes, I will walk you through that future scan hour by hour and show you exactly when we are tracking some breaks in the rain this weekend. Taylor?
Amy, thank you. Switching gears here now to our top story this morning. A Baltimore City police officer shot in the leg while trying to solve a dispute with a man who was having a mental health issue. The suspect has since been arrested, and the Baltimore police officer is now crediting another officer with his quick thinking and saying it likely changed his life. That other officer applied a tourniquet to his leg, preventing a very tragic situation. He's now in recovery after undergoing surgery. In December of last year, Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley was killed while on the job. But efforts to beef up penalties for people convicted of crimes against an off-duty or on-duty officer, rather, have failed. The bill that would have originally eliminated the parole option for anyone convicted of killing or attempting to kill an officer, but an amendment was added, essentially gutting the bill. It's in a new form. The bill is only expanding the state scholarship fund for children of first responders that have died in the line of duty.
So you completely took everything away of any criminal charges and slapped us in the face with an extension to a scholarship fund. The decision was put in place to support the bill based on the criminal charges put behind the bill. We want justice, and providing a scholarship is not going to provide justice for her children at night.
State Senator Jill Carter backed the change, saying the option to eliminate parole wasn't really necessary. She says any murder is heinous. Now, also, she says the right policy for Maryland is to create a standalone offenses just based on a victim's profession. We're also learning the bullets fired in a double shooting in Fells Point earlier this week may not have been intended for the victims. Sources say one of those victims works at the restaurant there, but so far, Baltimore police have not released a motive.
What I was told, part of the violence that occurred was targeted toward a certain individual, or it was believed to be targeted. But when folks commit heinous acts of violence, often others can get hurt. And that is unfortunately what happened here.
Now, Councilman Z. Cohen is shifting the blame to Marilyn Mosby's stance on lower-level crimes, saying that policy feeds the chaos that we saw this week in Fells Point. Alexa Ashwell has more.
Much of the chaos and violence we've seen here in Fells Point has happened in or around Broadway Square. You can see the gates still up, the city closing the square early, other security measures, added security measures, the cameras right there. Well, now Councilman Cohen admits not only does he not agree with all of the crimes Mosby chose to not prosecute, but told me he believes the rollout of it fed the mayhem. The two people shot on South Broadway Street, the latest violence.
It's been a lot going on as far as like violence in this area.
In what's been a challenging couple of years here in Fells Point.
To be blunt, it's been a real challenge in terms of what the state's attorney is and is not prosecuting. We've seen, unfortunately, the lack of clarity with the policies play out in Fells Point.
Councilman Zeke Cohen, for the first time, critical of the rollout of Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby's controversial decision back in 2020 to not prosecute certain lower-level crimes, including drug possession, attempted distribution, trespassing, open container, and urinating in public. Crimes that have been playing out here in Fells Point and even led to a group of restaurant owners threatening to withhold tax money.
Whether or not folks agree with the policies, there are some that I think make sense in terms of treating addiction like a disease. There are others that, in my opinion, don't make sense. And we saw things like criminal trespass and public urination that just are not fair to our communities and do cause there is a victim to that crime. And so to just roll it out without any real internal communication with BPD from the current state's attorney, I thought was truly unfortunate.
Large crowds, fights, people on top of police cruisers, shootings, and even homicides, all part of the mayhem that began back in 2020. But Cohen then not critical of Mosby, her policy change, or the rollout of it, rather remaining quiet and rejecting invitations to a Fox 45 News town hall to discuss the problems in Fells Point and any potential correlation between the two. Political analyst John Dede,
I look at it as a political move.
Weighing in on the timing.
In the primary, he did endorse Ivan Bates, who has opposed a lot of the Mosby policies on this. The other thing is this. There's going to be a city council president race in 2024. Nick Mosby's currently in the job, and there has been rumors for some time that Zeke Cohen would run for that seat.
Cohen saying his motive is to push for better communication and a clearer path.
It is incumbent on Mr. Harrison and Mr. Bates, and of course Mayor Scott, to be in a good communication pattern to make sure that they are clear internally around what the policies are going to look like, and that those policies are translated all the way down the line.
Actions he believes will help address the chaos in Fells Point. We've been keeping in touch with police on the latest with this investigation. At last check, the man was listed in critical condition at an area hospital. The department has not released any suspect information. No arrests have been made. Reporting in Fells Point, Alexa Ashwell, Fox 45 News.
That brings us to our question of the day. Do you believe Baltimore city leaders are playing politics with your safety? So far, 100% of those who voted say yes, but we want to hear from all of you. Go to foxbaltimore.com to make your voice heard. After protest at Johns Hopkins University, what students are saying in regards to campus safety.
And we are looking at a soggy, breezy, and really cool weekend ahead of us. Low 60s today, struggling to get out of the 50s tomorrow. I'll break down our weekend rain chances in a couple of minutes. It's 7:38. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
Maryland's High Court will hear gubernatorial candidate Dan Cox's lawsuit regarding mail-in ballots before Election Day. Now, this was a practice that was first implemented in 2020 through an executive order from Governor Larry Hogan. But Cox says that executive order is unconstitutional and should no longer be valid. Election observers say waiting on results would diminish the public confidence in the election. Johns Hopkins officials and city leaders met for the third and final hearing to discuss a proposal for a private police force on campus. This comes as a group of protesters is now suing the city, arguing the university cannot appoint a private police force since Johns Hopkins is within city limits. Supporters say the goal is to keep students safe. Maintaining any proposed police force would have plenty of oversight.
The JHPD falls under the jurisdiction of the Baltimore City Civilian Review Board and the newly created Baltimore City Accountability Board. The legislation also defines the scope of the JHPD. It limits the JHPD's jurisdiction to campus areas only. It limits the size of the JHPD to no more than 100 employees. It prohibits the acquisition of military-grade equipment, and it requires all of our officers to wear body-worn cameras.
Now, protesters say they're concerned Johns Hopkins University police won't be able to be held to the same standards as officers in the city. Protesters cut both of the first two meetings short. The meetings switched to virtual, but that did not stop people from making their voices heard. Some argue the university police already have to go beyond their reach. They say, in addition, adding more officers would do more harm than good. Placing limitations on leaders. As midterm elections approach, how could voting ballots cause some confusion for voters? Without term limits, an elected leader can serve until they're voted out. But there's a growing number of supporters for limits. However, the wording in the ballot question is now raising even more questions about how that would even work out. Joining us live this morning to talk about term limits is community activist and former Baltimore NAACP President Doc Cheatham. Good morning, Doc. Thank you for joining us here.
Good morning. It is great to be on your show and very much appreciative of having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you are a Baltimore resident, 15 years, and you've been voting in this city for quite some time. Now, one thing voters will see on this ballot, the question K, that may lead them to vote differently. There was a sentence that was removed, though. So two-term council members can now run for mayor immediately following their 8 years.
Yes, what they can do is that the term limits basically get us to what's happening in 9 of the 10 largest cities in the United States. It allows you to run for a first term, which is 4 years, and then a second term, which is 8 years. You are able to run for other positions. You can run for the council president, the controller, the mayor, but you can only run for the 2 4-year terms once, and then you're required to go to another position.
So Question K really allows people to answer this question for themselves. So tell me, what do you think would happen? I know you have tried to challenge this before.
I've never actually legally challenged it before. You know, I've supported it before, but this is the first time I've actually put my support and other people's supports that support the concept into a major organization. But it was introduced as a charter amendment, and it's time for a change. The President of the United States is in a term limit. The governor of the state of Maryland is in a term limit. Many of the largest counties in the state of Maryland are in term limits. And just re-electing the same people over and over again does not give other individuals the opportunity to bring their expertise to the table.
Dr. Cheatham, thank you very much. We will definitely see that on our ballots come voting. It's already voting season, really, but we will definitely keep that updated for people here who are watching Fox 45. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are still tracking Hurricane Ian as it's made its way up the East Coast. The remnants of that storm already here in Baltimore. On your left there, a live look over the Inner Harbor. It's dark, wet, it's gloomy, folks. But we are in for a gloomy weekend. We've got team coverage here this morning as we track where the storm is heading. Meteorologist Amy Arison, thank you. She's in the studio with us breaking it all down. But we want to go send it over to Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers. Live in Annapolis this morning. We've seen that storm surge. What's it looking like now?
Yeah, Taylor, big storm surge, of course, in Florida and in the Carolinas. Around here, this is kind of our version, and I wouldn't call it severe necessarily. It does flood here quite a bit on even an average high tide, but this is going to be a little worse than normal. I just want to kind of give you an idea of the breadth of the flooding. Usually, my photographer, Brandon, is going to focus here. Usually, you could just step on dry ground here, and you can see that there's definitely some water that's covering some of the walkway in the little park at the end of Ego Alley here in Annapolis on the edge of the Severn River. And we expect a high tide at 9:02, peaking out at about 2.8 feet. So that's running about 1.5 feet, give or take, above average. Now, when you have a high tide that's running at about 3 feet, so just a little higher than that, usually you'll get this parking lot here flooding out. And actually at 10:48 tonight, we are expecting that high tide to peak. That's going to be the highest one at about 3 feet. So we could expect that I think a lot of folks are going to be moving their cars, and maybe these runners here waving hi to us will be staying a little farther away later on this afternoon and this evening. Now, a little bit of light drizzle falling here at Annapolis. The wind's still a little bit gusty, but how are things looking on the maps there?
I actually broke down some of the numbers you were just running through, Jonathan, so people could see it. I broke down the high tide times in Annapolis over the next 24 hours. So Jonathan's right. At 9:02 this morning, that's when we have our next high tide at 2.8 feet. That puts us in the minor flood category. By 10:48 tonight, we up it to 3 feet, and that also puts us in the minor flood category. But like he just mentioned, more impacts from that. And that puts us about 1.5 feet to about 2 feet above where we should be for that area. And that's why they are under that coastal flood advisory up through 2 a.m. on Sunday. And here's a look at the reason why. We are tracking what's left of Ian. Looks pretty spread out right now as it pushes through our region. Heaviest rain is off to our north and east. We're just dealing with some pesky showers, but we're also dealing with the winds. They're picking up from the northeast, and that's setting us that onshore flow that's resulting in a little bit of flooding. If we track this hour by hour, you'll notice we are just in and out of the showers today. That means on and off showers for the rest of your Saturday. Sunday, that actual low is going to rotate past us, and as that happens, I think it'll up our chance for some steadier rain, but not until later. That means at kickoff for the Ravens game, this is the scene. We're stuck under the clouds. Yes, we'll dodge a couple of showers throughout the game up through about 4 or 5 o'clock, and then here comes the heavier stuff. Late Sunday night, 10, 11 o'clock, we get some steady rain pushing through before this mess finally starts to rotate away from us. Takes its good old time, though. Even Monday looks pretty unsettled. Here's a look down at Towson right now. Does not look pretty. If you look closely, you can actually see the camera shaking back and forth just a little bit. Looks gray, looks gloomy. And we've got some cool temperatures also. We're hanging out in the 50s and 60s. I think that Bel Air reading probably a little off at 70 degrees. Not quite that warm this morning. I would grab a nice warm jacket if you're stepping out to run some errands on this Saturday. Doesn't look pretty with highs in the low 60s, on and off showers. A soggy finish to your weekend and even cooler. It's a struggle to get out of the 50s on Sunday. This is what you need to know about Ian this weekend. We're not really tracking any significant flooding or wind damage or power outages, but I would have the wet weather and the rain gear with you if you plan to do anything outside. Spotty showers linger through Monday, but after that, we finally dry things out and warm things back up. The 70s are back by midweek. Taylor?
As the Ravens take on the Bills for one of the biggest matchups of the season, we'll tell you why they may be relying on a veteran to make a big impact this Sunday.
Welcome into your morning sports report. I'm Rocco DeSangro. While the baseball world watches and waits for Aaron Judge to hit home run number 62, that would pass Roger Maris for the most ever in the American League. The O's had bigger fish to fry. Birds enter the night 5 back with 6 to go. Let's check out what happened in this one. They got off to a great start in the top of the first. Ryan Mountcastle hits a shot down the left field line, brings in Cedric Mullins to make it a 1-0 game. Aaron Judge's first at bat. Jordan Lyles sits him down. Judge went 1 for 2 to the 5th. Oswaldo Cabrera. He sends a solo shot to right, and that ties it at 1. Lyles went 7 strong innings, 1 earned, 4 hits, and 9 Ks. Great outing from him. Top 6, bases juiced. That one gets away from former Oriole Zach Britton, and Adley Rutschman would score. Britton left the game shortly after with left arm fatigue. Bottom 9, 2 outs. DL Hall on the mound. And the rookie gets his first MLB save in the Bronx. What a moment for him. O's pick up a big 2-1 win, securing a non-losing record for 2022.
Well, it just means that we exceeded expectations and that our guys, fought all year long, and we're not done yet. And just really happy with the effort with these guys all year, proving a lot of people wrong.
Us older guys, we might not be here in the future, but this organization, the city of Baltimore, is definitely in good hands.
The Ravens released their Friday injury report ahead of Sunday's game. Ronnie Stanley was listed as doubtful last week, only to be downgraded to out before the game. This week, he's questionable. Stanley did not practice yesterday due to rest, but it's a step in the right direction. J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, and James Prochet are all expected to play. Justin Houston and Patrick McCarry are both doubtful. With Justin Houston listed as doubtful for Sunday's game, the Ravens could very well be relying on one of their newest acquisitions to step up. Jason Pierre-Paul practiced with the team for the first time on Wednesday. Asked if he'll be ready soon, Pierre-Paul said, "Yes, I'll be ready this Sunday. I'll definitely be ready." He has the experience, 91.5 career sacks to show for it, 2 Super Bowl rings, and he feels like he can win another with this team. This is what he had to say yesterday. Quote, "The way they practice hard. The way they get after the ball, the way they communicate with each other, I think you have a pretty good shot, but it's hard work," end quote. The Ravens get back to work this Sunday at M&T Bank Stadium against the Bills. Kickoff is scheduled for 1 p.m. How about some high school football action? Poly looking to move to 5-0 on the year, taking on Digital Harbor. And the Engineers got after it on both sides of the ball. Marquise Jones and Tyson Jones in on the sack. Then the Engineers would get to work on offense. The give goes to Dale McDaniel, who finds the end zone from a few yards out. Then Nathan Gordon going to take it around the right side and in for the score. Poly rolls in this one, 42-0 final score. McDonough and Loyola Blakefield going at it. Eagles with a big lead in the 4th. Anthony Redfern gets his hand in there to break up what would have been a touchdown. So McDonough takes over on downs. Eagles looking to add to their lead. Braden Palazzo avoids the sack, gets it to Michael Tan for the big pickup on the play. The Dons would get on the board late when Brad Seiss connected with Shane Elliott for the score. But the Eagles will go on to get the win, 21-10, the final score. That's your morning sports report. I'm Rocco DeSangro. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you for being here on this Saturday. It's October 1st. It's the first of the month. I'm Taylor Stewart. We are still tracking Hurricane Ian and the remnants that have made their way here to Baltimore. We're in for a wet and gloomy weekend, guys. Look here on the left. That's a live look over Towson where rain is coming down. It's drizzling a bit more now, but on your right, you can see our Weather Authority radar tracking the storm's path. We also want to make sure we keep you covered minute to minute. Live team coverage this morning as we track where those remnants are heading. Meteorologist Amy Erickson in the studio for us, breaking it all down. But let's start with Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers. He's outside in Annapolis, and we've seen that water rise, but it looks like it might be receding a little bit. It's looking nicer than it was when we first started talking, Jonathan.
Unfortunately, we are still coming up until 9:02. I believe in the background you can hear some of the bells from the naval base and from of course Annapolis Naval Academy. But I want to show you here what's going on with the water. This is the most important part of the storm for us here at Annapolis. You can see where the tide line basically is, where all the leaves and debris have kind of washed up. Here's the Haley Memorial. We talk about this often when we talk about the potential of Annapolis flooding. And when things start getting kind of bad, that's when this all begins to go underwater here, this entire group of statues. And it's getting close at this point. So eventually, when this high tide here hits about 2.8 feet coming up likely in about 2 hours or so, or hour to 2 hours, about 9:02. When that happens, we could start seeing a little bit of water in the parking lot far away over there, and this should begin to fill in as well. Where I'm standing, probably we won't be able to stand here anymore either. So that's the main threat that we're seeing here at Annapolis. We do have a little bit of drizzle falling. The wind's still a little bit on the gusty side. I wouldn't call it a severe storm for us here in Maryland, but I would say it's impactful for weekend plans. Kids going out to the baseball fields, that type of thing. Could have some cancellations this weekend because of the remnants of Ian coming through. How's it going there in the studio? What do you have there, Amy?
Yeah, it doesn't look pretty anywhere, Jonathan. But of course, we do have that coastal flood advisory for where you are right now in the Annapolis area. And that's actually going to take us through early Sunday morning. That means impacting high tide coming up just after 9 a.m. this morning and then 10:48 p.m. Expect some high water in the same spot that Jonathan is actually standing right now. And here's a look at the radar. It's confirming exactly what he showed us. Couple of sprinkles, a little bit of light rain showing up in the Annapolis area. Also the case in Baltimore City. No real heavy rain right now. And I really think that's going to be the case all day long. We're done with the heavy stuff. It's just the nuisance stuff as we head throughout your Saturday. Plus, it's breezy out there. Current wind speeds anywhere from calm up to 20 miles an hour in some locations, and winds are coming in from the northeast. That gives us that onshore flow, and that's adding to that flood threat along the shoreline. If you've got to get your dog out this morning, I know mine hates heading out in the rain. Maybe just keep it a little shorter because it is damp and dreary out there. And most likely the sidewalks are wet. You're going to encounter some puddles. Temperatures also in the very cool upper 50s, low 60s. Coming up in 10 minutes, I will walk you through the timeline for the rain for the rest of the weekend and let you know exactly when what's left of Ian is going to clear us here in Maryland. Back to you.
Now, FEMA is calling on help as areas battered by Hurricane Ian continue cleanup this week. Maryland's Task Force 1 is deploying its urban search and rescue team. The group is sending an artillery of trucks and manpower. The Montgomery County-based group had already been to Puerto Rico, helping with recovery efforts there from Hurricane Fiona, which knocked out the entire island's power grid. And we've already seen some cancellations this week. Fells Point Fun Fest already postponed, and the Oceans Calling Festival was canceled as well. But your big games, your football games, seem to be going on as planned. 3:30, UMD taking on Michigan, and Bills versus Ravens Sunday at 1 o'clock. We're continuing right now with our top story. A Baltimore City officer shot in the leg while trying to solve a dispute involving a man with mental health issue. The suspect has since been arrested, and the Baltimore police are crediting the officer's colleague with his quick thinking to apply a tourniquet to his leg, preventing what could have been a very tragic situation. The officer is now in recovery after surgery. And in December of last year, Baltimore police officer Kiana Holly was killed while on the job. But efforts to beef up penalties for people convicted of crimes against an off-duty, or rather an on-duty officer, have since failed. The bill that would have originally eliminated the parole option for anyone convicted of killing or attempting to kill an officer was gutted. The amendment basically took out the entire bill that would allow the state's scholarship fund for children of first responders killed in the line of duty.
So you completely took everything away of any criminal charges and slapped us in the face with an extension to a scholarship fund. The decision was put in place to support the bill based on the criminal charges put behind the bill. We want justice, and providing a scholarship is not going to provide justice for her children at night.
State Senator Jill Carter backed the change, saying the option to eliminate parole was not necessary. She says any murder is heinous, adding it's not the right policy for Maryland to create standalone offenses just based on a victim's profession. We're also learning about the bullets fired in a double shooting in Fells Point earlier this week. They may not have been intended for those victims. Sources say one of those victims worked at one of the restaurants there, but so far, Baltimore police have not yet released a motive.
What I was told, part of the violence that occurred was targeted toward a certain individual, or it was believed to be targeted. But when folks commit heinous acts of violence, often others can get hurt. And that is unfortunately what happened here.
Joining us live this morning to talk about the ongoing violence and the mayor's summer crime plan is Bishop Angel Nunez of the Bilingual Christian Church in Southeast Baltimore. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It's been a violent week, though, here in Baltimore. We've seen several shootings. I mean, in just a short period of time, 18 since last Sunday. Do you think the crime plan that's been laid out for this past summer, has it worked?
I have mixed feelings about that. I think some have worked, but for the most part, I think more has to be done. I understand that at present, I don't have the exact number, but I think 254 have died, which is horrible. And yet in the month of September, last time I looked, there was 13 homicides. So it shows that the numbers may be coming down and there may be some results. But outside, I hear the police department staffing this and that. But the truth of the matter is we're headed towards another 300 murders a year for 8 straight years. And we got to do better. All of us, not just the police, community, politicians, religious leaders, all of us got to do better.
I mean, and you just gave that figure, 254. I mean, but double that people have been shot but survived. This crime plan was laid out earlier this year. Do we need more time to see it come to fruition, or do city leaders need to do more?
I see that with time, I see the numbers going down or at least staying steady. So I'm hoping that that we get some results. But there's so much things happening behind the scenes. Let me quickly give you. I'm the president of Act Now Baltimore, and through Temple X, we are focused on working with the Baltimore City public school system, our youth, our young people that are getting into trouble. Right now, we have 167 churches working with the Baltimore City public schools as chaplains, okay? And we're recruiting church offices where we can meet with these young people to help with these crises. So things are happening. Chaplains from the Baltimore police are working with us. So things are happening behind the scenes. But believe me, I am praying that God would give us the favor, the grace, and that this would be the year that we do not make it to 300, even though no matter what it is, any life loss is a disaster, the way I look at it.
Bishop Nunez, we appreciate what your church is doing, and we've seen a lot of effort, I think, from organizations to try to get young people on the right steps, but we continue to see the violence here in Baltimore rise. So we'll have to keep our eye on this and bring you those updates as we hope to see a change in the coming weeks. Thank you, Bishop Nunez.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right, after being disrupted by protesters a few times, Johns Hopkins held its final meeting about its proposed police force, when those officers could start patrolling the campus.
And say good morning to what's left of Ian. Looks like a big mess right now, and that's going to be the case for our weekend. I'll break down the timeline of the rain hour by hour so you can make your plans accordingly this weekend in a couple of minutes. It's 8:09. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
Maryland's High Court will hear gubernatorial candidate Dan Cox's lawsuit regarding mail-in ballots being counted before Election Day. Now, this was a practice first implemented in 2020 through an executive order from Governor Larry Hogan. But Cox says the executive order is unconstitutional and should no longer be valid. Election observers say waiting on the results could diminish public confidence in the election. Just 2 years after rolling out the multi-billion-dollar Kerwin plan, we're already seeing a little bit of setbacks. Project Baltimore looks into whether the plan is already outdated.
Project Baltimore is sponsored by the Snyder Law Group. Call 410 the Firm.
It's a multi-billion-dollar plan to improve public education here in Maryland, the Kerwin plan. 2 years after rolling out, it's already facing quite a bit of setbacks here. As Project Baltimore's Crip Pask explains, the man behind the massive funding is asking for patience. Britt Kerwin says Maryland is on track to have America's best schools in less than 10 years.
There being 95 votes in the affirmative.
February 2021.
The veto is overridden.
Maryland's legislature overrides Governor Larry Hogan's veto and passes the largest education spending increase in Maryland's history. $30 billion additional tax dollars over the first 10 years. $4 billion additional tax dollars every year after that. It was called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, also known as the Kerwin plan.
First of all, the blueprint is very rigorously drawn from the elements of the highest performing school systems in the world.
Britt Kerwin spent 4 years leading the commission that drafted the plan.
We took those strategies, put them into the Maryland context, and that's how we built the blueprint.
All of a sudden, everybody knows a lot of people that are infected.
In early 2021, the world was suffering through the COVID pandemic. Many state politicians, including Comptroller Peter Franchot, called on the legislature to delay voting on the blueprint until we emerge from the pandemic. But the legislature passed it anyway.
Did COVID, in a way, sort of render the blueprint outdated?
No, absolutely not. COVID is short-term, had very significant impact, but COVID is short-term. The blueprint is forever.
But the effects of of COVID are not short term. So distance learning, for example, distance learning is never going to go away.
Right.
Many critics of the Kirwan plan point out it doesn't address distance learning. Maryland is also facing major bus driver and teacher shortages. Schools in the Baltimore region reported hundreds of openings leading up to the start of school. Many blame the Great Resignation due to COVID. But as the nation faces a teacher shortage, the blueprint added teachers, attracting them with higher pay. So far, it hasn't seemed to work. But Kirwan says in a few years, it will.
I think what we've done in Maryland is to create a model for teachers with this career ladder and substantial increases in pay, more autonomy in the classroom, is going to make teaching in Maryland not only an attractive career position for Marylanders, but for attracting people from across the country.
The blueprint also created incentives for teachers to achieve higher levels of professional certification. But that, too, hasn't gone as planned. Over the summer, facing pressure from school systems, the Maryland State Department of Education lowered the requirements of some teacher certifications to get more teachers in the classroom. But Kirwan says this, too, is only temporary.
It would be silly for me to predict exactly what date it would be totally back to normal, but I think over the next 2 or 3 years, things will seem very much a place where we'd like them to be.
The Kirwan plan was not the first time Maryland overhauled public education. 20 years ago, the legislature passed what was called the Bridge to Excellence Act, or the Thornton Plan, which at the time was the largest education spending increase in the state's history. But the results were questionable. In 2002, when Thornton passed, Maryland's high school graduation rate was 3 points above the national average. By 2019, Maryland's graduation rate had gone up, but the national average went up more. Maryland's graduation rate and the national average are now the same. Kirwan says Thornton succeeded by increasing funding, but failed in creating a structure for how the money was used. The blueprint, he says, is different. It lays out strict guidelines and expectations for how the additional funding can be spent. He also says there's accountability.
As the money is allocated, there's an accountability board that is going to measure progress towards meeting these expectations. And the AIB, the Accountability Board, has the authority to withhold funds when jurisdictions are not meeting the expectations.
What Thornton also didn't have was a definition for success. For Kirwan, it's clear. In 9 more years, after $30 billion additional education dollars are spent, despite the effects of COVID, Kirwan says success will be if 80% of Maryland students are considered career and college ready by the end of 10th grade. And that is a lofty goal. Right now, he says that percentage sits around 40%.
That would be success. That would be remarkable. It would put us way ahead of every state in the U.S., and it would put us on a par with the best performing school systems in the world.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore.
We are continuing our coverage here of what was Hurricane Ian. After slamming into Florida and battering the Carolinas, it's now a post-tropical cyclone, and it's heading our way. You can see here on your left, this is a live look over Towson, where the rain is coming down a little bit. But here on our right, our Weather Authority HD radar shows the track of Ian. And we're giving you live team coverage this morning. We've got Amy Aronson in the studio for us, breaking it all down. But let's first send it over to Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers, who's live in Annapolis this morning. You said 9:02 might be the time we see that water hit its peak.
Yeah, and, you know, Taylor, just in less than an hour, we'll see this water peak out, and you can see I don't know if I'd recommend this, but that we've got some folks, some little kids trying to play in the water here. Of course, we always say you should not go in any of this standing water as it comes in or drive through any of this water. You don't know how high it's getting. But I can tell you, as you take a look here towards the Haley Memorial, that water is starting to lap up right along the bottoms of the statues. And you can see, if we take a look, Brandon, way out there, that's where the water usually is, way out towards some of those pilings. This is going to peak at 2.8 feet, about 1.5 feet above where it normally should be at high tide. Potentially tonight, an even higher peak of high tide that could get up to about 3 feet, which could begin to flood the parking lot down the way here. So folks are going to have to move their cars. And I just got an email that my son's soccer game is canceled because of some of this stuff. And I think we're going to see a lot of that type of thing this weekend. Amy?
Yeah, I think so, Jonathan. Not the best morning for soccer games or any outdoor activities. At least the kids in the water there had their rain boots on, and that's what you need today. The rain gear is a must. Taking a look down at M&T Bank Stadium, doesn't look pretty today. Of course, we're getting ready for that big game tomorrow. Going to look pretty similar. So if you're headed out tomorrow and you're planning your outfit now, rain gear, that's going to be a must. And that's because I am tracking on and off showers all weekend long, along with some cooler temperatures. Upper 50s right now. We've got that east-northeasterly wind at 18 miles an hour. That's an onshore flow, and that's the reason why Jonathan is seeing some flooding in Anne Arundel County this morning. All that water just getting kind of shoved up against the low-lying areas and the shoreline in Anne Arundel County. And we are tracking what's left of Ian. Looks like a mess right now, pretty spread out as it moves across the mid-Atlantic. The main remnant low is off to our south and west. You can see it in the final frame of this loop here on our weather map. That's what's passing through, and that's what's going to keep showers around for the next couple of days. Next 3 days actually are going to look like this. Not heavy rain, but just some scattered showers, kind of a nuisance. We've got some showing up in Annapolis right now, some scattered about north and west of Baltimore City. And this is going to be the case all day long. Future scan shows it. We see these green little blips on the future scan here straight through the afternoon and tonight, actually leading us into Sunday morning. If you're going to be tailgating for the Ravens game leading up to that 1 o'clock kickoff, yeah, have the rain gear with you. You're going to want to have a nice warm rain jacket because we have on and off showers that take us through the evening. And actually Sunday night, we get some steadier rain briefly pushing through as that low passes by us. Doesn't last long, wraps up overnight, and by Monday morning, we're back to the pesky on and off showers again. That will take us actually through much of Monday afternoon too. Here's an updated look at exactly how much rain we're tracking over the next 3 days. It is spread out over 3 days, so because of that, I don't think we're tracking any flooding issues from the rainfall. About an inch and a half expected in most locations. Today, a day for indoor plans. On and off showers. Be prepared. Some of your outdoor activities may get canceled. We've already seen that happening. Low 60s today, so it's also cool. Tonight's a great night to stay in, watch a movie with the family. We have temperatures staying consistent in the low 60s. Tomorrow, bring the rain gear for the Ravens game. It's going to be a wet one, a soggy day, and a cool one with temperatures in the breezy low 60s. Looks like spotty showers wrap up on Monday. After that, we gradually dry things out and warm things back up, and we're back in the 70s by midweek. Taylor?
And you said it, Amy, the Ravens are getting ready to take on the Bills at home tomorrow. We've got the latest on the injury report coming up in just a few minutes. Another live look over M&T Bank Stadium ahead of a huge matchup this weekend. Two of the NFL's top offensive teams are set to show down. The Bills and the Ravens will take on each other tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Come on, guys, this will be fun. And we may have some good injury news for the Ravens. This could be the week we see left tackle Ronnie Stanley back out on the field. He's listed as questionable for Sunday's game, but we do know he was in practice. A Baltimore police officer now recovering after being shot in the line of duty. Our fellow officer's quick actions may have saved his life. Ooh, and you can barely see Towson there. It's a wet and soggy weekend here in Baltimore. We've got the update on the hurricane, the remnants of Hurricane Ian as it moves in our area. And as we head to the break here, a live look in Ocean City where you can see that high surf. We'll continue to keep you updated with the latest on Hurricane Ian's track. This Saturday, October 1st. I'm Taylor Stewart. This is the harbor. It looks pretty decent, but we do know the remnants of Hurricane Ian have made their way to Baltimore, and we are in for a wet and gloomy weekend. You can barely even see Towson just as the rain continues to fall there. But on your right here, you can see our Weather Authority radar tracking the storm's path. We have team coverage this morning as we continue to see that high surf in Ocean City and Annapolis. The water's rising there, too. We've got meteorologist Amy Harrison in here at the studio. But first, let's head out to meteorologist Jonathan Myers. So tell me, what are you seeing right now? It's 8:30, close to 9 o'clock, and we'll see that peak.
Taylor, here at Annapolis, we're seeing a very high tide. So this is the thing we're most concerned about, aside from a very impactful rain and wind-filled weekend. Looks like a lot of plans outside probably going to be canceled. But you can see the high tide line that's up to almost the Haley Monument now. We talk about this a lot when we're talking about Annapolis flooding. Now, the good news is that outside of this little park in this area and potentially this parking lot that's way down here later on tonight that may start going underwater, life in Annapolis is pretty normal. You do see the wind that's kind of carrying the flags around. There has been a little bit of drizzle, but folks are walking their dogs, they're taking their jogs. Hasn't really been a huge impact in terms of this coastal flooding, aside from lifting some of these boats here that, in fact, are all kind of lined up. You see Ego Alley is packed. This is because of the Power Boat Show, the Annapolis Boat Show happening here on the 6th of October. But right now, it looks like the boats are safe, and thus far, we're safe from the water. But it looks like, again, this is probably about as high as it gets now. It could get higher for the 10:48 high tide time coming tonight. Amy?
Yeah, and we are still tracking some lingering showers, Jonathan. And like you said, that's going to be the case all weekend long. Just not a pretty weekend for anything you want to do outside. Radar shows the sprinkles showing up now everywhere from Annapolis to Pasadena, up through Eldersburg, extending up into Carroll County. So everybody in and out of these on and off showers today. And that's going to take us all the way through the weekend. Also breezy out there, windy out there. We've had wind gusts up to 26 miles an hour where Jonathan is in Annapolis, 25 miles an hour in Baltimore City, 21, the most recent one reported in Westminster. And some cool temperatures to go along with it. Not only is it cloudy and damp and dreary and breezy, it's also very cool. Temperatures are stuck in the mid and upper 50s this morning. So if you are headed out maybe to take a walk, take a jog, I would certainly layer up. And as you plan out the rest of your day, plan on having the rain gear with you, on and off showers straight through the afternoon, with highs staying in the breezy and the cool low 60s. Coming up in 10 minutes, we'll take a look ahead at the rest of the weekend, and I'll show you exactly when all this rain is going to clear out of here. Taylor?
Now, we've got several officials on the ground from the International Association of Firefighters in Florida. They're to help with the cleanup effort as Hurricane Ian pummeled the state. Now, this morning, we're joined by Patrick Morrison. He's the Chief of Field Services for the IAFF. And tell me about what you guys are seeing there on the ground. I know you said this is not like what you've seen before.
No, it's not. This is, until you get on the ground, until our reports came back, the devastation is quite unbelievable in some areas. We've done this since 1992. We've been in many, many hurricanes, many storms, from the Katrina to Harvey, all of those. This is right up there. I mean, right now, we don't know how long we're going to be in there, probably weeks, helping our members. But right now, this is, and it's not over yet either. We're getting our South Carolina, North Carolina reports. And what we're really concerned about this morning is what we call secondary flooding in a lot of central Florida. I've never seen a storm that came across on the west coast of Florida, hitting in that Cape Coral, going right through the state, regrouping, coming back in and hitting again. So you can imagine we have over 7,000 members that are affected by that. And what we're trying to do right now is that, you see on the news, the firefighters out there helping, the first responders, our members, everybody out there, but who's helping them? Mm-hmm. They're stuck at their firehouses. They're doing that. Who is helping them with preparations and getting to their families and making sure that they're safe?
And I know, I just really want to speak on that point. We're about getting to their families. There are people who stayed there and are now probably looking at the destruction of their homes and places they're familiar with. Have your guys been able to talk to any of those folks, and what are you guys gleaming?
Yeah, we've set up 2 commands. We've set up one in Tampa. We try to set up our commands that are outside of that zone so we can get in supplies, we can get in resources, we can get in. We have a big crew, work crew that came down from Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania. They set up that command operation there, and we have one at Bonita Springs below that, so we can kind of hit our members in 2 different ways. They've been out there for the last 2 days. They're out there this morning. They've assisted over 150 of our members with water, food, financial help, generators for those that need it immediately for medical needs. Fuel right now is at a premium, trying to get fuel in there to, generators need the fuel, and it's very, very difficult. And then we're going to back that up with sending in our mental health peer support teams to help, not only with the firefighters, but, when you're a firefighter and you're stuck there, is somebody helping your family, is somebody helping your kids, is somebody making sure that they're being watched. And that's our job. We have firefighters coming in from all over the country. We have supplies coming in, and it's difficult to get supplies, so we have to go outside the region, come in with new supplies to make sure that we can assist with a lot of members have flooding. Mm-hmm. We're tarping roofs, we're removing trees. So we have a full operation that we've done over the last decades to do this. We're really experienced in it, and these are firefighters helping firefighters, those first responders, our members, to get the help they need.
And that's important. That's incredibly important, Patrick. I appreciate you joining us this morning. I know you guys will be out there for, you told me, at least maybe 3 weeks. So thank you for the work that you all are doing to help other first responders who are responding to this crisis.
Thank you. And thank you for getting this message out. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Shifting gears now to a city in crisis. A Baltimore City police officer was shot in the leg yesterday. He was trying to resolve a dispute with a person who was experiencing a mental health issue. Now, that person has since been arrested, and Baltimore police are crediting the officer's colleague with his quick thinking to apply a tourniquet to the officer's leg. They say that prevented a really tragic situation. The officer is in recovery after surgery this morning. And in December of last year, Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley was killed in the line of duty. But efforts to beef up penalties for people convicted of crimes against an on-duty officer have failed. Now, the bill that would have originally eliminated the parole option for anyone convicted of killing or attempting to kill an officer was gutted. There was an amendment in there that essentially gave people the option to have parole. But now the bill only expands the state scholarship fund for children of first responders. A Maryland couple accused of trying to spy for Russia? But the duo of doctors is hardly the first from our area. The Spy Museum shares why the DMV is a hotbed for espionage.
And we are looking at a cool weekend ahead of us. We'll spend today in the low 60s. Tomorrow, it's a struggle to get to that 60-degree mark. I'll break down our rain chances for you hour by hour in a couple of minutes. It's 8:37. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
Good morning and welcome back here. We have more details on an alleged espionage case involving a Maryland doctor couple. We learned both have been released from custody and confined to home detention. The Baltimore-Washington area actually becoming a hotbed for spies. Fox 45's Amy Simpson explains why.
This is far from the first time we've heard allegations of espionage in our region, and a spy expert says it's because what's in our backyard. As we sit just outside of our nation's capital, we're not far from headquarters for the CIA and FBI, and the National Security Agency is located at Fort Meade in northern Anne Arundel County.
Washington, D.C., there's no two ways about it. This is a global epicenter of intelligence and espionage. It's a city of spies.
The historian and curator of the International Spy Museum says at all the foreign embassies and the World Bank, and chances are you're bumping elbows with somebody who has a security clearance and access to information.
Especially if you live in the corridor between Baltimore and Washington. You know, if you just think about who your neighbors are.
This week, another chapter in the book of U.S. citizens accused of espionage with the federal indictment of a Johns Hopkins anesthesiologist and her spouse. a doctor and U.S. Army major who was profiled in 2015 as the first openly transgender officer. The couple accused of trying to share medical information that could be exploited by the Russians, instead unknowingly dealing with an undercover FBI agent. Also this week, a 30-year-old Colorado man and former NSA employee arrested and accused of trying to sell classified documents to a foreign government, but was really dealing with an undercover agent. And on Tuesday, an Annapolis couple entered new guilty pleas after they were accused last year of trying to sell submarine secrets to a foreign power, dropping memory cards in a gum wrapper and a peanut butter sandwich, also unknowingly to U.S. counterintelligence.
These are things that we always keep our eye on.
The International Spy Museum says it dives into the motivations for committing espionage.
Why spy? Like, why would you do this? And this is one of the major things that we look at.
The most common reasons fall into the acronym MICE.
Money, ideology, coercion, and ego.
And for those questioning if there are spies among us, this expert says in this region, it's not a matter of if, but how many.
Are there spies among us? I think that's throughout history, that's always been the case. It just depends on the amount.
As for the pair of doctors accused of trying to share private medical information with the Russians, yesterday a judge ordered the pair to give up passports and any weapons, also ordering them to wear monitoring devices that will trigger an alarm if they go within 5 miles of an airport. Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
A lingering danger on military bases, the toxic chemicals the Defense Department knows about, but still has not cleaned up. Heading into the break now with a live look over Towson. Expect a gloomy day. It's going to be a wet one this weekend. We've got an update for you on the remnants of Hurricane Ian as they move through our area. At Towson, man, it's a gloomy weekend, guys. You're in for the remnants of Hurricane Ian, so make sure you've got an umbrella here. But we count on the military to protect us from the enemies, but there's a growing threat internally on U.S. bases. It's a toxin that could be a huge harm to human health. And despite years of knowing about it, most bases have not even started to clean it up. Spotlight on America's Chris Daniels explains.
Drive over Deception Pass in Washington State, and you'll be exposed to some of America's most beautiful views. But here, at this scenic spot on Whidbey Island, just north of Seattle, there are growing concerns about what else people are being exposed to from this island's naval air station. So you moved here for the beauty of the island?
The beauty, yeah.
And you discovered something else?
Right. These chemicals are a curse.
The chemicals environmental activist Rick Abraham is talking about are known as PFAS, a set of man-made toxins which have been tied to cancer and other health problems. For decades, these chemicals were used in a type of firefighting foam on military bases, sprayed by the gallon on runways during training exercises and to douse fires, including here at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. Government leaders confirmed those toxins seeped their way into the soil and drinking water of surrounding communities.
Do you believe there are people getting sick right now because of what's happened there?
Yes, I do.
On Whidbey Island, the Navy's own tests show levels of one type of PFAS chemical in the drinking water that's more than 30,000 times what the EPA now considers to be unsafe.
The people who cause the pollution should be responsible for cleaning it up. You cause harm to someone else, you're responsible for fixing the problem. Common sense, common law. So the Navy needs to deal with this situation.
The situation extends far beyond Whidbey Island, with more than 700 military bases either known or suspected to have PFAS contamination. That means millions of Americans are potentially at risk, according to Melanie Benesh, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Environmental Working Group.
And so if you have been living near a military base for a long time, it's possible that you have been drinking water that's contaminated, and you could be at risk of seeing health effects from those exposures.
This summer, her organization looked at the 50 military sites dubbed the filthiest in the U.S. by Congress, spanning 30 states and including Whidbey Island, and found that while they've all launched investigations, none have begun the phase of actually cleaning up.
Part of it is just DoD slow walking this issue. They have known that PFAS are dangerous for decades. So I think the Department of Defense is committed to cleaning up these sites eventually. But the question is, how long is it going to take?
The Department of Defense refused an interview with Spotlight on America and did not answer our specific questions about timelines for cleanup. That leaves Whidbey Island residents like Brian Christensen with troubling questions. He lives just steps away from the base and sees the planes fly overhead every day.
My biggest concern is the not knowing. We just don't know what the long-term implications are. I'm going to be really sad someday if something happens to my kids because some chemical that wasn't being looked at properly affects them.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
Switching gears here, the remnants of Hurricane Ian making their way into Baltimore this weekend. You are in for a wet and gloomy 2 days here. A live look at Towson, and on our right here, the Weather Authority HD radar as remnants move in here. We've got team coverage for you this morning. We've got meteorologist Jonathan Myers with the latest on what's happening in Annapolis, taking a seat there. But we've also got meteorologist Amy Aridson in the studio with the latest on breaking down that track here. So let's start with Jonathan. What are you seeing?
Yeah, and Taylor, I just wanted to kind of let you know, it's not the severe weather like they saw down to our south that we're seeing out of Ian and its remnants. And in fact, I just used my umbrella for the first time this morning. I had to put it away again because now it's just drizzling. The biggest thing here at Annapolis is a little bit of rain. We've had a little bit of wind, but especially the tide. Take a look at where the tide usually should be. You can actually see this kind of wood piling that's through the water. That's where our typical water line should be. Now, Brandon, my photographer, is going to kind of follow me here. Our high tide is coming up in about 10 minutes from now, and this is where the water is right now. And you can see the high tide line where the water line is right here all the way up to some of the bricks in the walkway in this small park here at the edge of what we call Ego Alley. That's right by Randall Street here in Annapolis. We're expecting a peak high tide at 2.8 feet, which means minor flooding almost to the moderate level, and maybe even a somewhat higher tide coming up at 10:48 tonight. And that's all compliments of the winds around the remnant flow or the remnant low and the remnant circulation of Ian. Now, Amy's got the full update and the full rundown and what you could expect this weekend out of Ian. Or I should say, Amy.
Yeah, that's right, Jonathan. That's what we're tracking, what's left of Ian. That's what's causing all the issues today. And like Jonathan mentioned, not a severe weather event for us, but we are tracking some issues still. You'll notice it's a spread out system now. It has weakened. That remnant low is actually well off to our south and to our west. We're just dealing with on and off showers today as a result, plus some winds coming from the northeast and the east. That gives us that onshore flow, and that's what causes that water to pile up along the shoreline, especially in low-lying areas like in Annapolis, where Jonathan Jonathan's hanging out this morning. If we track this together hour by hour, you'll notice on and off showers straight through the afternoon today takes us into tomorrow morning. Looks like tomorrow is similar. We just have some scattered showers throughout the day. That includes if you're headed out to the Ravens game, kickoff at 1 o'clock. Looks like the showers will linger through that, so I would bring the rain gear with you. Some heavier, steadier rain actually briefly pushes through late Sunday night as that low passes by, and then showers will actually wrap around and linger again through Monday. So 3 rainy days ahead of us, including today. Looks damp and dreary down in Towson. Cool out there, upper 50s in most locations. Bel Air having a little issue with their reading, not exactly 70 degrees there right now. It's going to be a cool one, low 60s today. Same setup tomorrow, even cooler, breezy both days with on and off showers. Just a soggy weekend. Here's what you need to know about Ian and what you can expect. Rain gear, that's all you need. We're not really expecting power outages, wind damage, or flooding. Quick look ahead at that 7-day forecast shows we finally dry out starting Tuesday. Taylor?
What's up for grabs in the midterm elections? I'm Scott Thuman in Washington. Coming up, we'll take a look at the tightest races and who has an edge just over 5 weeks away.
The ads, the money, the stumping, the handshaking, the kissing babies, not so much anymore. But it's all at a fever pitch across the country as midterm elections are fast approaching. Sinclair's chief political correspondent, Scott Thuman, has the latest on some key races.
Well, if you're looking for political nail-biters that will legitimately have an impact on the direction of the country, there are plenty of them. First, though, let's take a look at where we stand. Democrats playing defense in the House. Republicans need to gain just 5 seats there to take control. And I spoke with Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy last week. They're very optimistic based on some early polling. Over in the Senate, it couldn't be any closer. Currently, it's a 50-50 even split in the upper chamber, and Democrats hold the power technically because, of course, they have the White House, and Vice President Harris serves as the tiebreaker in the Senate. So Republicans need to gain just 1 seat to take control. So let's stay in the Senate. Here are 10 of the most heated races to watch across the country. And if you believe the polling, aside from Colorado and New Hampshire, all of these matchups are within just a handful of points separating the 2 candidates. Extremely tight races. In other words, anything can happen. Now let's take a closer look at 2 states where Republican seats right now are up for grabs due to retirements. That is an opportunity for Democrats. In Ohio, you've got current House member Tim Ryan, who's trying to flip that seat. He's going up against author J.D. Vance, the Republican. He has the tiniest edge at the moment. Over in Pennsylvania, a nasty fight going on between Republican TV celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, who only slightly trails Lieutenant Governor, Democrat John Fetterman. Over to two races where Democrats hold seats, but Republicans are threatening to flip. Adam Laxalt with a razor-thin lead right now to unseat Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto. And in Georgia, what a surprise race going on right now as Republican former football player with no political experience, Herschel Walker, is within striking distance of Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock. He just won that seat, by the way, in a runoff last year, and who prior to winning it had no national political experience himself. All of this making for a fierce 5 weeks until Election Day. On Capitol Hill, I'm Scott Thuman.
All right, let's get over to Genevieve Gorder with a look at today's steals and deals.
The following segment is sponsored by Knocking.
You guys, I have a product that solves a pet peeve so many of us have when we jump in our car. The cup holder that isn't big enough to hold your cup, your water bottle, your coffee. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This is the solution. This is the Cup Captain from Sharper Image. It's a 2-in-1 cup holder that rotates 360 degrees and doubles your storage space. You just twist to fit any size cup holder right here, and it locks it in place so nothing will tip. Now, here's my favorite part. You know, you all have this water bottle that doesn't fit in the cup holder, and it rolls around on the ground, on your lap. It's annoying. This will adjust to fit large or small. So gone are the days of your water bottle falling on the floor and clanking around. This expands and contracts to fit any size cup, just right. And the great news is that it's not just for drinks. The Cup Captain is perfect for all kinds of things. It holds food containers, tablets right here, even your wallet. We all have these organizational systems for our desks, our nightstands, our kitchens, our closets. Why wouldn't we have that same approach to an area we spend so much time in, our cars? It's perfect for kids in the back holding their snacks and their tablets. And we're offering 25% off today, you guys. And it's a 2-pack. To take advantage of this deal and save money, go to asadeals.com.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us here on Fox 45. We're starting off your weekend and your month here this October 1st. I'm Taylor Stewart. We've got some big stories for you this morning that we are continuing to follow. First up, a Baltimore City police officer shot in the line of duty. How a fellow officer's quick thinking likely saved his life, and what we're learning about that shooter. and nearly $2 million headed to nonprofits aimed at preventing violence in the city. How exactly that money will be used. And here, a pair of doctors caught in a Russian espionage plot. Why one expert considers our area to be a global epicenter for spies. But first, we continue tracking the remnants of Hurricane Ian. It's a post-tropical cyclone now as it's making its way up the East Coast. It battered Florida, hit the Carolinas yesterday, but we're going to have some of that but some of that rain here in our area. We're going to give you team coverage with Amy Aronson. She's in the studio with us, breaking it all down. Chief meteorologist as well, Jonathan Myers in Annapolis. Tell me, what are we seeing right now at this point? I see the umbrellas out.
Yeah, enough rain to actually finally pull my umbrella out here in Annapolis. And I want to show you what's going on with some of the storm drains right here on Randall Street. You can see they're beginning to back up a little bit. This not necessarily from rain, but from the high tide. Of course, water seeks its own level. So if Brandon could follow me along here, this is the end of the Severn River at Ego Alley. And you can see, again, where the high tide line is, the ducks out there playing in the water. We've also got, again, that high tide line coming right up on the what we call the Haley Memorial, and that's what you see with all these statues kind of grouped together here. And this high tide now peaking 9:02 a.m. at 2.8 feet, which means it's at about 1.5 feet above where it typically should be. So we've seen some flooding here at the Haley Park, and potentially some of this backup of water through some of those storm drains could occur at the 10:48 tide this evening. That could cause some flooding in the parking lot that's down in back of me there. And of course, we're going to have more from Annapolis coming up in just a couple of minutes. Amy, how's it going in the studio?
Yeah, we are keeping a watchful eye on the radar. Also, that coastal flood advisory, that's what Jonathan's talking about. Actually, a little update for you. It was extended northward and now includes Baltimore City, too. That means along the shoreline there in places like Fells Point, low-lying areas, I would expect to see what Jonathan's seeing, where that water is just lapping up along the shoreline. So be prepared for that. That takes us until early tomorrow morning, right around high tide in both locations. And we are seeing some showers develop here on the radar. We've got some towards Annapolis. That's why he has the umbrella out. We've also got some streaming through Baltimore City right now. And this is really going to be the case all day long. So I would have the rain gear with you if you are going to be out and about today, because at any given point, we are tracking some on and off showers. We're also tracking some winds coming in from the northeast right now. That's that onshore flow pushing all that water right up against the shoreline. Right now, wind speeds anywhere from 10 to 15 miles an hour. We could see these gusts as high as 20, 30 miles an hour today. If you're stepping out with the dog, maybe taking a jog or a run, have the rain gear, a rain jacket. That is a must. It's also cool out there. Maybe keep the walk a little shorter with temperatures hanging out in the low 60s. Coming up in 10 minutes, I will walk you through the future scan hour by hour and also let you know exactly how much rain we're tracking through the end of the weekend. Taylor?
In a city in crisis, there's new video showing the moments after a shooting at a bus stop near Mondawmin Mall. Now, this happened on Thursday. Viewers' video showed what happened as police say 2 young people got into a fight on that bus when one pulled out a gun and shot the other. The shooting and the recent shootings in Fells Point putting those who live in the city on edge. And joining us in studio this morning, Pastor Rodney Hudson with Ames Memorial United Methodist Church to talk about the surge in crime and the number of young people that have been involved this year alone. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Now, tell me a bit about why you think we're continuing to see young people, particularly fueling the crime that we're seeing here in Baltimore.
Many of our young people are dealing right now with post-traumatic stress issues, poverty, all of the systemic structures that play a hand in people feeling depressed, despondent, hopeless, also affect our children. And they've had example after example of violence as ways to handle conflict. I suggest that this is compounded by the fact that we don't have enough employment for our youth, compounded by the fact that recreation centers are not open as they should be for youth in our individual communities. So something has to be done to stem the tide, or things will get worse before they get better.
And we've seen that here. We've had over 250 fatal shootings, more than double that when we think about people who've been injured in shootings here. We're talking about 1 year. We're not even towards the end of the year yet. As we continue to see this growing, there's a lot of community organizations that are helping, but it doesn't seem to be having an immediate impact when you look at the numbers. What else can we do? What else can city leadership do?
Well, one thing I'm happy about is that organizations like Black Mental Health Organization has been given over $1 million grant to study this and to make an impact in the youth violence that's going on in the areas of Pennsylvania Avenue. Over $5 million have been allocated to Baltimore City organizations to do that. And so I think continuing to give money to these organizations that have boots on the ground is one of the ways that we can do, one of the things that we can do to stem the violence. The second thing we need to do is encourage our judges to hold those who commit violent acts accountable and stop giving and offering and enabling them to take the easy routes out. Employ restorative justice techniques where not only have you harmed the store, but you have harmed the community. And so we need to employ restorative justice opportunities for those who commit these violent acts.
And absolutely, your congregation has been on top of this as well, of helping out, especially on the mental health aspect as we continue to see that for young people. Tell me what you guys are doing, boots on the ground. We know you got some grants in place as well.
So right now, I'm so proud that we have an organization, Resurrection Sandtown, and what we're doing right now is we're bringing young people in ways to volunteer and to serve. But not only to volunteer to serve, we get an opportunity to mentor and to tell them about the different strategies, different ways out of community violence. We're able to be right there on the corners with them and to talk with them and to build relationships. Those are just the Band-Aids, but Resurrection Sandtown wants to do more than that. We want to build community centers, places for people to live, so that the impact that we make will not only just be a Band-Aid approach, but the impact that we make will deal with the direct issues. That's why we're in conversations now with Black mental health initiatives, and so that they can work with us to help stem the violence that's going on. We've got to teach our young people that violence is not the answer, that taking up a gun and shooting someone is not the answer. Donnell Rochester was killed not only in our community, but he was killed by oh my goodness, I'm so emotional about
I
Donnell.
understand. It is an emotional thing.
He was a member of my congregation, but he died senselessly. And right now we have no answers from the police department of why things have not taken place to give us answers. And so the violence that we are experiencing is a relationship, because not only are we not getting answers from our community, but we're not getting answers from our government agencies that are poised to go and give us answers. So it has to be a complete turnaround so that everyone can be involved in the solution and not just point out the problems.
Pastor has a lot of frustration, a lot of questions, and a lot of accountability that I think folks here in Baltimore want to see as the crime continues. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I know it was emotional to talk about him, but we appreciate you providing that context.
We all know that COVID-19 changed a lot of how we talk to people, but did you know it's also changed our personalities? I'm Liz Bonas. We will share a new study that might surprise you. It is just ahead.
And Ian's remnants have arrived right here in Maryland. I'll explain exactly what these rain showers mean for your weekend plans in a couple of minutes. It's 9:09. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
A live look right now over M&T Bank Stadium, where two of the top contenders are set for a showdown this weekend. The Ravens hosting the Bills tomorrow. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Oh man, the Ravens will have some good injury news as well. Take a look here. We've got this week, we might see Ronnie Stanley back on the field. Yeah, he's listed as questionable for Sunday's game, but we'll keep our eyes on it. Kickoff scheduled for 1 o'clock. Okay, this is the city of spies, apparently. Baltimore and Washington, D.C. becoming hot spots for spies following a controversial espionage case. If people seem a little less friendly or more neurotic these days, it may be one more thing you can blame on the coronavirus. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares why a new study is focusing on pandemic personality.
Hey there, everybody. COVID-19 changed a lot of how we had to talk to people, where we could go, and how we had to work. Now, this new study says it may also have played a crucial role in changing our personalities. To find out how, researchers compared 5 characteristics that commonly stay the same under stress. In the study just released in PLOS One, they looked at more than 7,000 people ages 18 to 109. They compared how we answered questions in 2020 linked to neuroticism, how agreeable we are, our level of conscientiousness, our desire to be extroverts, and our openness with others. They found by 2022, our neuroticism went up, and our rates of other traits went down. We were less likely to be extroverted and open, agreeable, or conscientious. And this was at a rate that would normally take about 10 years. These kinds of changes, rather than building up the body's health, tend to break it down, and they could make us more vulnerable to physical and mental health problems.
I think this has really come from a reaction to or a result of the pandemic.
Psychologist Dr. Tracy Cummings says some of these things carry over into our lives, and it's why we struggle and become what we call quiet quitters at work.
I think when you boil it down, this refers to burnout.
It's important to note, however, that the pandemic has made everything harder, and our personalities adapt to our environment.
You know, back in the days, apparently those were days we just walked outside and went and did what we wanted to. And now we have to, look at a crowd or look at a situation or look at an enclosed space and decide if we're going to do something differently.
Those kinds of decisions, even now, Dr. Steve Fagan says, can make you a little neurotic. It is right now too soon to tell if these personality changes are long-lasting. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonas. Now back to you.
The remnants of Hurricane Ian have made their way to Baltimore, and we are in for a wet and soggy weekend. On the left is a live look at Towson, where rain is coming down, and on the right, our Weather Authority radar is tracking that storm's path. But we've got live team coverage for you this morning as we track where the storm is heading. Meteorologist Amy Aronson in the studio with us this morning. But first, let's send it over to Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers, who's in Annapolis for us. What is it like where you are?
Yeah, Taylor, on occasion the winds come up and kind of buffet things a bit. You can see here as Brandon, my photographer, turns around. We'll take a look at the Maryland flag there on Randall Street. And there's a little bit on occasion, a little bit of a buffeting wind up to about 20, 30 miles an hour. Also, the rain comes down kind of in bands from time to time. You can see the clouds are kind of darkening. And then we clear a little bit, then we darken up, we get a little downpour, then it clears again. But really the biggest thing that we've been dealing with here is the high tide that's been coming up. The ducks, man, they've been eating something in there. I don't know what, but they've been enjoying this. I guess there's some sort of feast in the water for them. But you can see the high tide line that's been coming up with all the leaves and the debris. That's where our highest tide has been. It actually peaked out at 2.8 feet, which meant some minor coastal flooding here. Nothing on the likes of the surges that they saw south of us down in South Carolina, down into Florida, but about 1 foot to 1.5 feet or so above average. And we'll probably peak out about 1.5 feet to 2 feet above average at the high tide time tonight after just about 10:30 or so. I believe it's 10:38 tonight. So we could see some flooding at the city dock parking lot. But for now, you can see all the boats behind me. I was just talking to somebody associated with the Maryland Powerboat Show that's going on here October 6th. And she said, boy, is it cold, and it is windy, and it is rainy. And that's not going to help any of their attendance numbers. But hopefully things will clear out by the time they start their show on October 6th. But for now, again, we've got a little bit of rain and a little bit of flooding going on with the tides here at Annapolis. Amy?
Yeah, from Annapolis to Baltimore. Doesn't look pretty in Baltimore right now, Jonathan. I know you can't see this, but rain is actually actively falling there, reducing visibility some. Technically, I think we're looking at M&T Bank Stadium in the distance. Can't really see it right now. Unfortunately, it's going to look similar to this tomorrow, too, for game day. We're off to a cool start, upper 50s to begin. We are under that northeasterly wind at 15 miles an hour. That's an onshore wind flow, and that's what's pushing all the water up against the shoreline, not only in Anne Arundel County right now, but also Baltimore City. And we can thank, or I guess blame, what's left of Ian for all of this. It looks much weaker than it did before impacting our neighbors to the south, of course. It has weakened significantly to a remnant low, but still a lot of rain, a lot of moisture associated with it. The heaviest stuff right now is off to our south and west. That's with the low. For us, we're just dealing with the pesky on and off showers. But as you can see on the radar, we've got some light green now showing up in Baltimore City, and that's the rain that's falling there. Scattered showers all around the region. This will be the case all day long. Not a complete washout, but also it's not going to be completely dry. Actually, far from it, with on and off showers taking us through the afternoon, overnight tonight, right into your Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon doesn't look much better. Look at this. At 1 o'clock for kickoff at M&T Bank Stadium, we have this stripe of light green showing up in the Baltimore area. That's that light rain. And then it looks like on and off showers will actually take us through game's end, right through your Sunday night as that low passes by us and ever so slowly drifts away from us even Monday. Even Monday looks damp and dreary with more scattered showers expected. Let's take an updated look at how much rain we're expecting. Now remember, this is over the next 3 days. So although we're expecting close to an inch and a half in some locations, I don't think we'll see any flooding courtesy of this. And that's just because it is spread out over the next 3 days. Today, it's an umbrella day, umbrella and rain jacket day if you have anything to do outside. Low 60s as we get into the afternoon. It's going to be breezy. It's going to be rainy. On and off showers will continue tonight. Perfect night to maybe hang by the fireplace, watch a movie with the family. It's also going to be cool. And it stays damp and dreary, breezy and cool tomorrow for the Ravens game. Temperatures will be in the upper 50s, low 60s throughout that. Quick look ahead shows spotty showers linger through Monday. It's not until Tuesday that we start to dry things out. And then by midweek that we welcome back the sunshine with highs in the much warmer 70s again. Taylor?
Nearly a year after Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley's death, what's being done to beef up punishments for crimes against officers? And it's the city of spies, the controversial espionage case that may lead to Baltimore and Washington being the global epicenter of intelligence. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News, all local, all morning. All right, this is a weird case, guys. There's an alleged espionage case involving a Maryland doctor couple that we've learned both now have been released from custody and confined to home detention. But the Baltimore-Washington area actually becoming a hotbed for spies. Fox 45's Amy Simpson explains why.
This is far from the first time we've heard allegations of espionage in our region, and a spy expert says it's because what's in our backyard. As we sit just outside of our nation's capital, we're not far from headquarters for the CIA and FBI, and the National Security Agency is located at Fort Meade in northern Anne Arundel County.
Washington, D.C., there's no two ways about it. This is a global epicenter of intelligence and espionage. It's a city of spies.
The historian and curator of the International Spy Museum says at all the foreign embassies and the World Bank, and chances are you're bumping elbows with somebody who has a security clearance and access to information.
Especially if you live in the corridor between Baltimore and Washington. You know, if you just think about who your neighbors are.
This week, another chapter in the book of U.S. citizens accused of espionage, with the federal indictment of a Johns Hopkins anesthesiologist and her spouse, a doctor and U.S. Army major, who was profiled in 2015 as the first openly transgender officer. The couple accused of trying to share medical information that could be exploited by the Russians, instead unknowingly dealing with an undercover FBI agent. Also this week, a 30-year-old Colorado man and former NSA employee arrested and accused of trying to sell classified documents to a foreign government, but was really dealing with an undercover agent. And on Tuesday, an Annapolis couple entered new guilty pleas after they were accused last year of trying to sell submarine secrets to a foreign power, dropping memory cards in a gum wrapper and a peanut butter sandwich, also unknowingly to U.S. counterintelligence.
These are things that we always keep our eye on.
The International Spy Museum says it dives into the motivations for committing espionage.
Why spy? Like, why would you do this? And this is one of the major things that we look at.
The most common reasons fall into the acronym MICE.
Money, ideology, coercion, and ego.
And for those questioning if there are spies among us, this expert says in this region, it's not a matter of if, but how many.
Are there spies among us? I think that's throughout history, that's always been the case. It just depends on the amount.
As for the pair of doctors accused of trying to share private medical information with the Russians, yesterday a judge ordered the pair to give up passports and any weapons, also ordering them to wear monitoring devices that will trigger an alarm if they go within 5 miles of an airport. Amy Simpson, Fox 45 News.
In the wake of recent shootings, we take a look at what's being done to prevent them and whether there is a cause for concern. Thank you for being here on this Saturday, October 1st. I'm Taylor Stewart. We are tracking the remnants of Hurricane Ian. It's made its way here to Baltimore, and you can see that weather HD radar showing the track, but it's really gross outside, guys. Gloomy, wet. Definitely a day you'll need an umbrella. We are bringing you live team coverage this morning with our team of meteorologists who are tracking its path. We've got first Amy Aronson in the studio, but let's head over first to Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers. He's outside in Annapolis, and it was raining, but the umbrella's gone now. So what are we seeing here?
Yeah, Taylor, the way it's been like kind of bands of rain, then some drizzle, then it dries out, and then we get another band of rain. Right now, it's one of those dry times, but it is not one of the dry times here at the Annapolis City Dock. You can see the water kind of lapping up here on some of the bricks. There's some kids really enjoying themselves. You can see them over there. They were just feeding the ducks and some of the birds, and the ducks have really been enjoying themselves with all this weather. But on a more serious note, what I want to show you here is, again, you can see the water all over the bricks. And I'm going to hop up on the wall here, and Brandon, my photographer, will follow me. You can see, again, where the water usually goes to, right here, kind of this little wood pylon area. And typically that's where our high tide is supposed to stop. And unfortunately, it's kind of gone inland a few more feet than it should. And you can see these benches here. No one's using those right now. They're kind of just submerged with water all around them. So we are going to actually continue to see tide fall from this point on, but it's going to come back later on tonight, and I'm going to give you a full update on what potentially we could be dealing with tonight out of some of the remnant Ian high tide that's coming up in the Weather Authority forecast in a couple of minutes. But for now, I'm going to toss it back to Amy here in the studio.
Yeah, and also keeping a watchful eye on the radar because we are in and out of the showers. That means you want to have your umbrella just on standby today. We've got some showers now actually moving through Baltimore City, pushing into the Towson area. That's the light green you're seeing here on the radar. And you can see these showers are just kind of striping their way through. And that's going to be the case all day long. On and off rain today, and actually tomorrow too. It's also windy out there. If we take a look at most recent wind gusts, not everybody reporting these, but those that are show they're up to 10 to 20, 23 miles an hour right now in spots like Annapolis. So that's that wind that's gusting every once in a while and helping shove that water up against the shoreline. It's also cool out there. Not only is it damp and dreary, we're starting off in the mid and upper 50s today, and temperatures are going to stay on the cool side, well below where they should be. We'll spend the 1st of October in the very cool low 60s. Plus, we've got the on and off rain showers to go along with it. Now, coming up in 10 minutes, I'll walk you through this forecast for the rest of the weekend and let you know exactly how much rain we're expecting. Taylor?
Our top story this morning, a Baltimore City police officer shot in the leg while trying to solve a dispute with a guy who was going through a mental health issue. Now, the suspect has since been arrested, and the Baltimore officer is in the hospital, but he's crediting his colleague with his quick thinking for applying a tourniquet to his leg, preventing a tragic situation. That officer is now in recovery after surgery. In December of last year, Baltimore police officer Kiana Hawley was killed on the job. But efforts to beef up penalties for people convicted of crimes against an on-duty officer have failed. The bill that would have originally eliminated the parole option for anyone convicted of killing or attempting to kill an officer was gutted. An amendment that was added initially moved from the bill expands only the state scholarship fund but only for first responders killed in the line of duty. We're looking at some major changes to Safe Streets beginning in October as one nonprofit's on the verge of losing its Safe Streets partnership as it receives millions of federal aid. FOX45 questions how they plan to spend the influx of funding.
And the first weekend of October is a cool one. We'll spend today in the low 60s. Tomorrow, not much better. We'll struggle to get to that 60-degree mark. I've also got some rain chances to go along with these cool temperatures. I'll break them down for you hour by hour in a couple of minutes. It's 9:34. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News.
Here's a look at some of the stories we have coming up for you this week on Full Measure. We are off to Maine. Residents there now have a constitutional right to produce, sell, and eat local food of their own choosing. This is all part of a growing food sovereignty movement, particularly with people growing more concerned about the food supply in the U.S. and globally. As the cost of college continues to go up and up and up, we're going to hear opposing viewpoints on this recent national plan by President Biden to ease the burden of student debt for so many, from students who owe big money, we'll hear from some of them, to taxpayers who are going to be picking up the bill. We're also going to talk to Dr. Ben Carson. He's a former member of President Trump's cabinet, and he shares his thoughts on what it takes to drain the so-called swamp in Washington, D.C., which he said really impressed him most, but not in a good way. He's also going to talk with us about being in the Trump administration in the past and possibly in the future. All of that this week on Full Measure.
City-run organization Safe Streets is tackling some of the crime here in Baltimore, but they're getting more money, federal grants, and we're looking into how that money is going to be spent. Mackenzie Frost getting to the bottom of it. This is the latest in this story.
We're starting to get a little more information about how the Safe Streets program actually works. When the U.S. Department of Justice first announced this grant, they talked about how the Living Classrooms Foundation implemented 2 Safe Streets locations. But since Mayor Brandon Scott restructured the entire program, that will no longer be the case. And now there are even more questions about taxpayer accountability and waste when it comes to how this money is being spent. McKeldrey Park and Bel Air Edison, 2 of the Safe Streets sites run by Living Classrooms. For now. Soon, LifeBridge will manage both.
Today, I'm excited to announce
this week, the Department of Justice announcing $1.95 million for Living Classrooms to do community violence intervention work after months of trying to get some answers from the patchwork of nonprofits running Safe Streets. Finally, an opportunity to get some insight.
So the DOJ was not under the impression that this money would be going to expanding Safe Streets or supporting Safe Streets.
Well, it does. It supports the violence intervention efforts, of which Safe Streets is a really important piece for the city. But so hopefully that answers your question.
I think that muddles it a little bit more because with Living Classrooms not monitoring, not administering the Safe Streets program, moving forward, what's the role with the Safe Streets, or is it just?
Well, we work very closely with Freedom and with Adam and LifeBridge, and we're partners, and we'll collaborate on a regular basis.
Fox 45 News sending questions to the Department of Justice, asking if the DOJ has a clear understanding of how Living Classrooms is currently spending money in the CVI space. Do you have an organizational chart for Living Classrooms? Is it the federal government's understanding that Living Classrooms is currently continuing to work with Safe Streets? We also asked for the DOJ
DOJ to provide the grant application from Living Classrooms, but the federal government ignored the questions.
This is a federal problem. This is a city problem. And ultimately, it's the citizens of Baltimore that are going to be affected by this.
David Williams, a taxpayer protection advocate, says pouring more money into a group that has been part of a program cloaked in confusion is problematic.
There are a lot of concerns.
With LifeBridge and Catholic Charities soon to be overseeing Baltimore's flagship violence prevention program, it's unclear how much money the city will be spending on safe streets in the future, as well as the role of nonprofits like Living Classrooms, who say they plan to continue their work in this arena. Are there new contracts in place to continue this partnership?
Yes, with Monsi, you should ask Monsi, but yeah, Monsi is contracting with LifeBridge and Catholic Charities, right.
With Living Classrooms, or will there be new contracts?
Not directly in administering a Safe Street site.
Right, but in the CBI ecosystem.
Yeah, we look forward to doing more.
This is a federal problem. This is a city problem. And ultimately, it's the citizens of Baltimore that are going to be affected by this.
When questioned about the future contracts with the city, the mayor shirks direct answers.
It's been a week since we heard about the Safe Streets stuff, the reorganization. Are we any closer on getting information on how much these new contracts will be worth?
So, Mackenzie, I think you know this very well. Contracts go through the Board of Estimates, and that's when it comes to the public. I don't know how many times we have to tell you that. We might have to give you guys another lesson on how city government works. Board of Estimates is where the public sees contracts, and that's how we're transparent.
Quite frankly, trust in the Board of Estimates really has dropped.
The mayor's non-answer prompting us to send him even more, including asking if he's hiding something about the Safe Streets program. The mayor's office refusing to answer. The change to the new management is set to begin in October. How much money the city will be spending for Safe Streets and others still remains unclear.
We did learn that the employees of the Safe Streets program are employees of the nonprofits that run each location, not the city of Baltimore. But as we continue this investigation, as we get more answers, more questions arise, and we are not done demanding answers and looking for accountability for your tax dollars and to see how this program is working to save lives across the city. In Baltimore, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Okay, sneakerheads, listen up. Now is your time to take advantage of discount prices at Nike. Why the company is lowering prices on many of their shoes. And an internal threat in military bases, the toxic chemical that could be putting our armed men and women at risk. You're watching Fox 45 Morning News, all local, all morning. There's a growing threat on internal U.S. bases here, a toxin that could be harmful to human health is sitting on bases for years, despite the government knowing about it. Most bases have not been able to start that cleanup process. Spotlight on America's Chris Daniels explains why.
Drive over Deception Pass in Washington State, and you'll be exposed to some of America's most beautiful views. But here, at this scenic spot on Whidbey Island, just north of Seattle, there are growing concerns about what else people are being exposed to from this island's naval air station.
So you moved here for the beauty of the island?
The beauty, yeah.
And you discovered something else?
Right. These chemicals are a curse.
The chemicals environmental activist Rick Abraham is talking about are known as PFAS, a set of man-made toxins which have been tied to cancer and other health problems. For decades, these chemicals were used in a type of firefighting foam on military bases, sprayed by the gallon on runways during training exercises and to douse fires, including here at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. Government leaders confirm those toxins seep their way into the soil and drinking water of surrounding communities.
Do you believe there are people getting sick right now because of what's happened there?
Yes, I do.
On Whidbey Island, the Navy's own tests show levels of one type of PFAS chemical in the drinking water that's more than 30,000 times what the EPA now considers to be unsafe.
The people who cause the pollution should be responsible for cleaning it up. You cause harm to someone else, you're responsible for fixing the problem. Common sense, common law. So the Navy needs to deal with this situation.
The situation extends far beyond Whidbey Island, with more than 700 military bases either known or suspected to have PFAS contamination. That means millions of Americans are potentially at risk, according to Melanie Benesh, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Environmental Working Group.
And so if you have been living near a military base for a long time, it's possible that you have been drinking water that's contaminated, and you could be at risk of seeing health effects from those exposures.
This summer, her organization looked at the 50 military sites dubbed the filthiest in the U.S. by Congress, spanning 30 states and including Whidbey Island, and found that while they've all launched investigations, none have begun the phase of actually cleaning up.
Part of it is just DoD slow walking this issue. They have known that PFAS are dangerous for decades. So I think the Department of Defense is committed to cleaning up these sites eventually. But the question is, how long is it going to take?
The Department of Defense refused an interview with Spotlight on America and did not answer our specific questions about timelines for cleanup. That leaves Whidbey Island residents like Brian Christensen with troubling questions. He lives just steps away from the base and sees the planes fly overhead every day.
My biggest concern is the not knowing. We just don't know what the long-term implications are. I'm going to be really sad someday if something happens to my kids because some chemical that wasn't being looked at properly affects them.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
Alrighty, post-tropical cyclone Ian has made its way here to Baltimore, and we are in for a gloomy and wet weekend. This is a live look over Towson down here, a very really muggy, and just gray. And over here you can see our radar as the storm continues to move northward. We have team coverage this morning with Amy Aronson here in the studio, meteorologist Amy Aronson, and we've got Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Myers also in Annapolis with what it's like there.
Yeah, Taylor, we've had our impacts, actually a high tide peaking out at 2.8 feet, about 1.5 feet above average. You can see the high tide line and the water still kind of lapping at the park here at the landing. This is a small boat landing. That's what they call it here at Annapolis. And here next to me is the Haley Memorial. A lot of times when we talk about flooding, we use the Haley Memorial as kind of a landmark. Once the flooding starts getting bad, this kind of starts getting overtaken by water. But as you see from the high tide line, didn't quite make it there, not just yet for this high tide, and this one is actually going back in. You can see some of the folks here, they're actually working on some of these floating docks, kind of adjusting these and pushing them back into the water as the tide comes down so they don't end up kind of marooned here on the bricks and some of the pavement as the tide goes back into the Severn River and into the Chesapeake. They'll probably be back here later on tonight and tomorrow morning doing the same thing because we expect a high tide instead of at 2.8 feet, potentially at about 3 feet, which will be a little bit higher. And at that point, we may actually see the City Dock parking lot as you kind of go yellow off in the distance there, where all these cars are parked, that may start taking on some water. And if you take a close look at some of the flags there, they're moving about a little bit. We've had winds peaking out at about 33 miles an hour here in Annapolis, up to 38 miles an hour over at BWI. And actually attached to the flag post, you'll see that we've got the United States Sailboat Show going on the 13th through the 17th of October. And before that is the Powerboat Show that's starting here on the 6th. And these folks that are adjusting these docks are doing just that. They're adjusting those docks for some of these boats that are in the background here. And these are all here converging on Annapolis for the Powerboat Show. So hopefully the weather is going to be a lot better when that starts on the 6th. But for now, again, some more rain, a little bit more wind, and another high tide that we're going to have to deal with here tonight with some at least minor coastal flooding in Annapolis. And Amy's in studio. She's tracking the remnants of Ian as well. How's it going there?
That's right, Jonathan. Yeah, you can see it's really spread out on the radar. That means we have a ways to go before all this rain clears us. The heaviest is actually with that remnant low right now to our south and to our west in parts of West Virginia. Right now, we are dealing with some on and off showers, and that's exactly what we're up against all weekend long. Future scan shows the showers streaming through from south to north here as this low gets closer and closer to us. I think on and off showers today and then right through tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, late afternoon, early evening hours, we get some steadier rain as that low passes by, especially Sunday night, some heavier rain at times at that point. Looks like showers will still be rotating through come Monday. Monday doesn't look pretty either. So 3 very unsettled days ahead of us starting today. Today we're stuck under the clouds. Not raining currently in Towson, but we know we are going to be seeing some showers throughout the day there. Temperatures are cool. Lots of mid and upper 50s in all locations. That means grab a jacket, grab a rain jacket if you're headed out today for anything. Low 60s today. Tomorrow's even cooler with highs actually struggling to get to that 60-degree mark. Plus, I think it looks even soggier with some steady rain by Sunday afternoon, taking us through Sunday night. This is what it means for the weekend. We're not really tracking any flooding, at least from the rain, just some flooding along the shoreline due to that onshore flow. Not really any significant wind damage or power outages locally, just some winds gusting up to 20, 30 miles an hour. But rain gear, I'm giving that a check. You definitely need the rain gear for whatever you have planned this weekend. And if that includes heading to the Ravens game tomorrow, rain gear is going to be a must. A soggy day for that game, unfortunately. Some spotty showers will linger through Monday, but after that, we're finally saying goodbye to what's left of Ian. We're going to dry out gradually. Looks like the sun is back starting Wednesday, and that's when we're also going to warm back up. We're going to enjoy a couple of warmer days next week with highs briefly back in the 70s. Taylor?
Topping your consumer news this morning, the CDC is recalling some cheeses after they were linked to a listeria outbreak. The CDC issued a food safety alert on Friday after the illness was reported in California, Georgia, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New Jersey. More than 20 brands of brie cheese sold between August 1st and September 28th across the U.S. and Mexico have been recalled. Fortunately, no deaths have been reported, but a total of 6 people ill and 5 people taken to the hospital. For more information on this, head to cdc.gov and click on the FDA's recall page. And apparently Nike has too many shoes, and that's a good thing for you. The brand is cutting prices in stores in an effort to free up some shelves on Thursday. Nike said its inventory levels soared to 65% in North America, and overall it was up 44% from last quarter compared to a year ago. The clothing is the main problem here, so Nike plans to discount those items that are now out of season. Stick with Fox 45 Morning News. After the break, meteorologist Amy Aronson will have your full 7-day forecast.
9:56 on this gray and gloomy looking Saturday. Get used to this scene. It's pretty much going to look like this, unfortunately, all weekend long. Hello, October, right?
Oh, no.
I know. Lots of rain, cooler temperatures, rainy and breezy today. I do not think it's a complete washout, but I also don't think it's completely dry. Far from it, actually, with just the on and off showers throughout the day. Have the umbrella, the rain jacket with you. Same for tomorrow for the Ravens game. Going to be a little messy out there at M&T Bank Stadium with kickoff at 1 o'clock. Some steadier rain pushes through Sunday evening and Sunday night. This all finally wraps up, and we're saying goodbye to what's left of Ian come Monday as it clears the region, and then after that will gradually dry out. I think we'll all be happy to see a little bit of sunshine Tuesday into Wednesday, and plus some warmer temperatures. We've had a really cool stretch, the low 70s coming up Wednesday and then mid 70s on Thursday. I think that's going to feel really nice, but that break from the air conditioning continues, right? Because we've got some really cool nights too. We have lows in the 40s and low 50s. Fall is officially in full swing, Taylor.
It is, man. I really like the 75 we saw on Thursday, though. That's what I'm looking for.
It's going to be nice.
Well, hopefully the wet weather helps us out on the football field tomorrow. The Ravens taking on the Bills, and we'll keep you guys updated here on Fox 45. Good morning.